want to send you out there to see if you can attract this guy.
How, where?
Lucas and Vincent were not in the mainstream of gay life. They were into heavy leather, S&M. It's a world unto itself. I don't know how much you know about that sort of thing. Well, if you take this assignment, you'll come out with more experience than any of my detectives.
Cruising is one of director William Friedkin's most hated films. In the year it came out, it was panned by critics and nominated for a bunch of Razzies. Despite this, I still wanted to watch it, as Friedkin is one of my favorite directors. Now having seen it, I have to say it's one of my favorite movies that was nominated for a Razzie. In this film, we follow a cop named Steve Burns, who goes undercover in the gay S&M community to find a serial killer. Straight off the bat, when watching this movie, you're going to notice that the movie's structure and delivery of its narrative is somewhat confusing and muddled. This could be somewhat frustrating, but I think it serves a purpose, as we're traveling into a world that's foreign to the main character, so it makes sense to make the viewer feel the confusion that the character is experiencing. Pacino depicts Steve Burns as so fearful of all the sexual activities going on around him, and yet there is a hint of curiosity in his eyes. His sexuality seems to be tested when he goes undercover. Him going undercover is perhaps an allegory for his closeted homosexuality, like most of Friedkin's work. Each scene in Cruising serves as studies of the characters and their surroundings. The way the murders are committed clearly allude to the killer's deep-seated self-hatred of his sexuality. There's a standoff scene towards the end of the movie that speaks volumes about a character's and Pacino's sexuality and their sexual frustration. This is why I like this director so much. He takes things that would typically be by the book in execution and adds a layer of psychology to them. He never feels like he's on autopilot. He strives for authenticity and complexity in all the scenes, something that's always felt when watching his movies. Despite my praise for Cruising, the movie isn't faultless. Its biggest fault is the fact that it has an insane amount of dub lines. Granted, you can't really notice some of them, but the ones you do notice are really distracting. The only reason they dubbed so many lines is because a lot of the audio they recorded was unusable because of protesters who deliberately made a lot of noise to make the movie's audio unusable. The music choices are also extremely weird and jarring. They don't really fit the scenes at all. The editing is also very blunt and makes the film feel like a disjointed patchwork at times. When reading about Cruising and its reception, I thought, man, this film must be a train wreck. But that's not what it is. Despite being one of this director's weaker movies, Cruising is still a fascinating study of its character and the real-life murders that inspired the story. If you don't mind some graphic content and some really bad dubbing, then I recommend you watch Cruising. Now for those who have already seen it, I believe the ending points to multiple killers, as the man who was arrested for the killings only committed one or two of the murders. The director clearly uses different actors in the murder scenes to show that there is more than one killer. There's also a clue that indicates that Steve Burns may have been one of the killers, as his neighbor was killed despite him never going out to cruise, but we'll never know for sure, and that's kind of the point. The movie serves as an allegory for the homophobic violence that plagued the 80s. The point of the ending is to show that there's always going to be another murder, and that they're not going to stop the killings until the hate towards that community is eradicated.